well, the founder of the Township Entrepreneurs Alliance, Bulelani Balabala, joins us now with more on this particular survey. Mr. Balabala, thank you so much for your time. This is quite an important one. I think it might be easy to forget that the township economy as well was hard hit by the lockdown. But before we get into some of the realities on the ground, you conducted a survey. What did the data tell you from the survey?
Good morning. Good morning, and thank you so much for the opportunity to have this chat this morning. I think one of the biggest things that came out of the data is what historically has always been there, which is that the conversation in and around the township economy is always, and the revitalization, as it's been said, and also the empowerment and development of entrepreneurs within this particular space and segment is left as just that, which is just conversations and topics. Because one of the main drivers that actually drove us to go as far as doing a survey was purely because we realized that there was no real data. That would give you fresh data, that would give you an overview or oversight in terms of what is actually happening in the township. But I think also further to further start the conversation of echoing out what the sentiment is in and around the entrepreneurs on the ground. Because I think as you go a little bit further in the data, you'd actually find that when the entrepreneurs are actually asked with regards to the relief schemes that were developed, one of the biggest things that we picked up is that there was a lot of confusion in and around the relief schemes that were developed, and they didn't speak to that market. And I think anyone designing and developing relief schemes that would help any small business or startups or township entrepreneurs alike would need to understand that these are guys who live on a 14-day cycle. Over and above that, these are entrepreneurs at the end of the day who are largely in debt. Yeah. So creating criteria and requirements that are very restrictive excludes them from participating in any sort of relief. And I think the access to the information in and around the relief was very confusing for the entrepreneurs, which left some not even interested in participating.
That's an interesting point that you make there. I mean, were you able to sort of go further and find how entrepreneurs within the township were able to sustain themselves during the lockdown, also because of the confusion caused, by the relief fund, and some probably even not gaining access to the relief, how they were then able to either continue being sustainable or unfortunately shutting down?
Yeah, unfortunately, quite a few had to shut down their businesses. But I think just in the nature of being an entrepreneur and an archetype, I'll actually say something. I don't know if it will sound a bit controversial or not, but I sort of feel like the COVID-19 pandemic is the everyday life of a township entrepreneur, but it's just not COVID, or it's just not labeled the lockdown or COVID, because it becomes very restrictive, and the red tape and the bureaucracy and the policies that are supposed to be aligned to help and develop township and rural entrepreneurs are very restrictive and very exclusionary rather. So I think they then face that as the reality for everyday living. But I think in the very archetype of an entrepreneur, being someone who would then have to adapt or die, quite a large number of them have adapted, which is why one of the biggest things I've always said in my engagements with the corporate, to government, entrepreneurs within this segment, they don't necessarily need money, in our view, from government as an immediate solution. Yeah. One of the most immediate solutions that are needed from government is for them to govern, for them to regulate the billions that are spent on enterprise-supplied development, for them to regulate what the various departments and municipalities are actually spending on the development of township and rural business. Because lockdown was a tragedy, but it also presented an opportunity. Instead of the historic practices of bundling up billion rand and multi-million rand deals and giving them to one individuals or the politically connected individuals, have these larger experienced organizations play an oversight role and then spread them up onto small businesses. Because if we are really saying, like the Minister Tito Mboweni was saying during his budget speech, that small business are the backbone of our economy. But if we constantly say that, and it sounds well and good in speeches, but we don't actually practice it when it matters the most, which is giving them an opportunity to deliver on services, then we're talking over ourselves.